ICQ Podcast episode 351. New RSGB President discusses the IARU RSGB Survey. Well, hello and welcome fellow amateur radio enthusiasts to this, our 351st episode of the ICQ Amateur Radio Podcast. Supported this episode by Patrick Bean, Simon Bracegirdle and Walter Washburn, KT0 Delta, along with our monthly and annual subscription donors. In this episode, Martin MRB is joined by Leslie Golf Zero, Charlie India Bravo, Dan Kilo Bravo 6 November Uniform, and Edmund Mike Zero Mike November Golf to discuss the latest amateur radio news. Myself, Colin M6BLY, rounds up the news in brief, and in this episode, we discuss the RSGB IARU survey with the new RSGB President Stuart Bryant. Well, as always, we'd like to thank our donors who keep this show advert-free and pay our way on the internet. And we'd like to start off with Walt Washburn, KT0 Delta. You might know Walter donated only a couple of episodes ago, and he's back again. And he said he was entertained by the recent discussion about rebranding amateur radio, especially the mistaken focus on amateur as a judgment of competence. It is not an assessment on that dimension, but one of motivation of the practitioner. We do it for the love of the physics and science and skill, and not for gain. I embrace the radio amateur designation. I apply a lot of knowledge, engineering skill and practice to achieve communication objectives in the face of a complex propagation, sophisticated technology, clever modulation techniques and a certain amount of luck. All for the love of bringing all that together. So really appreciate your feedback there, Walt, and I say many thanks all for your continued support of the show, and really do appreciate you finding value in the episode and sending a donation to him. We also like to thank Patrick Bean, also sent us in a one-off donation as well for supporting this episode. Thank you very much. And Simon Bracegirdle as well for setting up a subscription donation. So many thanks to yourself. Now you can do what Walt, Patrick and Simon have done along with our monthly and subscription donors by showing the value you find in the show by visiting www.icqpodcast.com/donate. And as I say, anything you send our way to show your value for the show is greatly appreciated and helps us continue to produce the show for you advert free. Well, now let's join Martin, Leslie, Dan and Edmund to discuss and generate thoughts about the latest amateur radio news, including Ireland rejects license levels and CANWARN training. As always, guys, hope you enjoy.
Well, hi guys, welcome to this episode's Podcast News Roundtable for episode 351. Tonight, I'm joined by Mr. Leslie Butterfield G0CIB. Hi, Leslie.
Good evening, Martin. Thanks for inviting me. By the way, can we publish the outtakes one day? They're hilarious.
Well, we do say, Leslie, and as you well know, there is one, and Martin Rothfeld's got a view floating a Cadbury's cream egg, but we do not publish the outtakes because...
I know. I was pulling your leg.
I know. We would have quite a lot of laughs, but I think we wouldn't get half as many interviewees. So, yeah. So that's why we don't.
I know.
Yeah. Moving the other side of the pond, we have Mr. Dan Romachek, KB6NU. Hi, Dan.
Hi, guys. You know, if you publish the outtakes, this would take twice as long as normal.
If I just run it live and didn't edit it, it would take twice as long as well. Oh dear. Oh, we do have a good chat though, but which is part of the enjoyment of the evening. And moving back to the UK, I have Mr. Edmund Spicer, M0MMG. Hi, Edmund.
If I put my foot in it, I would leave it in if I were you, Martin. Hello there. Hello, everybody.
Oh dear. Yeah, but we do have a clean rating, and we do have people that expect us to behave ourselves occasionally. Still, never mind. One day I might get my little Australian friend in the UK to join us. I might have to push the buzzer, though, a few times. If you're listening, Adrian, hi. I know you will be. Right, starting off, first news story. CANWARN online training in 2021. Now, this is in Canada, and it's all about storm warning and weather warning systems that you guys in North America do a lot of, and I know you know some of this from CANWARN in the US, Dan, don't you? So I'm going to pass it over to you first.
Okay, that's fine. So yeah, we have in the U.S. we have a similar program called CANWARN, and what CANWARN does is it trains people to spot severe weather conditions, like for example tornadoes. You know, we have tornadoes here in the summertime a lot, and or severe thunderstorms. And what this story is about is CANWARN, which is the Canadian version of this. And by the way, it's in Ontario, which I don't know if you realize this, but I'm really a stone's throw from Ontario. I mean, as the bird flies, I'm probably, well, certainly less than 50 miles from Canada here. And anyway, so that's I guess neither here nor there. But they're going to be doing virtual training. So here's how it usually works. Usually, you know, here at least in Washington County, they organize in-person training events. So to become a part of this program, you have to take this training, right? So because if you're going to report on severe weather conditions, you have to be sure that what you're reporting is actually happening. Like, is this really a tornado? Is this really there's a phenomena called the wall cloud, which is sort of a precursor to a tornado. So you have to really kind of know what you're looking at to be able to report on it, right? And here in the U.S., we've been doing this in person until the pandemic, of course. And now all this training has gone online. And that's what this story is about. In Ontario, they're going to be having an online training session on Wednesday, May 26th. And we're doing the same thing here in the U.S. And I guess you'll put in the show notes a link to, and everything here in the U.S. is very localized. So I think different areas will have different training requirements. So I would suggest that we put this link I put on our notes here to on our website so that people can go to it and click on it, then drill down to find what the local requirements are in their area. But I would think that in most cases they're going to do virtual training just like they're doing in Canada.
Yeah. Well, let's say, unfortunately, with the pandemic, online training certainly has taken over. But very interesting, Dan. Very interesting. Leslie, we don't tend to have bad weather here, but what do you think on this sort of thing?
Well, if we have an inch of rain, that we all go crazy over here. So, you know, the last time we had any really, really, really bad weather was in, I believe it was October 1987. Was that correct, guys?
I
Yes,
believe
correct.
so.
Yeah, okay. Well, we had a storm, and there was a place called Seven Oaks, and it became One Oak overnight. But anyway, that's a bit of British history for you. But no, one thing I do like about this is their online training, and I think that is the way to go. And with what's been happening recently, that has taken off, and there's going to be a lot more of it for various things. And I'm just glad they're using it. And you know, when things happen, you want some skilled operators, properly trained, to be able to do whatever the task is to hand. And I reckon it's really good. Good luck to them.
Yeah, well, there's lots of bad weather happens all parts of the world. And as I say, in the UK, we don't see too much of it. I know Phil Hickenbottom, VK6 ADF, sent me a video of the rain at the time when the typhoon went through where his part of the world. And then later in the day, he sent me some pictures of trees sprawled all over the roads and roofs ripped off buildings. So, you know, being able to warn people this sort of thing's coming through is very, very important.
Yeah, it's very good.
Yeah, but you remember well, you were a youngster when the big storm happened in the UK, weren't you, Edmund?
Yes, and I remember the date because it was about 10 days before a milestone birthday in my youth, and I managed to sleep through the entire thing somehow. So a reminder, as if a reminder were needed, how lucky we are in the UK, really. And obviously I wasn't a licensed amateur radio at the time, but I've spoken to a few people who were members of Raynet back in '87 and amateur radio. very much came into its own in the aftermath of that storm in '87, but that's another story. Awful in some ways to hear that this training is needed, but I'm very glad it's being offered out, seeing as it is needed. And in the notes it says that the topics covered in the training include, amongst other things, the basics of thunderstorm formation, the types of damage that severe thunderstorms can produce, what to look for in the sky, and information about winter severe weather as well. So it would be quite interesting from my point of view if that section of the training or a version of it could end up on YouTube or social media, because even though I'm not located anywhere remotely near Canada, I think I would be quite interested in watching that, Martin.
Yeah, well, knowledge is always good, Edmund. Knowledge is always good, and I say maybe it is on YouTube somewhere, or somebody will put it up there. Yeah, if you're going to record a session, if you're going to do a Zoom session, you might as well record it for future use, I would suggest.
I think YouTube is a fantastic resource. It really is.
Yeah, it's a fantastic resource, but it's once again buyer beware, because...
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, you got to be... It's like a library. When you go into the library, there was a lots of good books and there's lots of bad books, but it as you sort of researched and went through the different books, you got, your technology's changed, and we've got to, shall we say, sort through the information in a different manner. That's all.
Yeah, on that one. I mean, it's like the internet and one thing and another. Books usually are proofread and editors and all those sort of things. People can publish on the internet without all the safety stops behind them. That's all I'm saying. I see lots of videos on YouTube of people soldering, and if I had enough hair to pull out, I would. But anyway, in fairness, yeah, it's a great resource. Moving to our next news story. I've met this lady we're going to talk about many times. Amateur radio on BBC Radio Essex breakfast show. Dorothy M0LMR managed to talk to BBC Radio Essex on their phone-in, and Dorothy is one great lady. Part of Essex Hams. We've met her a number of times. So, Leslie, what do you think on this one? Unfortunately, I don't think you've met Dorothy, have you? But Edmund and I have.
Oh, no, I haven't had the pleasure of meeting Dorothy. I've heard so much about her, and I know she does interviews like this for the BBC, and I think it's great. And I heard she's a splendid operator from what I heard as well, Martin. And she put some of the men to shame, which is good on her.
Yeah, well, Dorothy came on HMS Belfast when it was open and when we had the radio room on there. And I sat her down in front of the 2-metre rig. She said she wanted to operate 2 metres. Fine. And I said, you can't leave until you've filled the logbook up. And I think she did about 3 pages in the logbook in London. I thought, wow, good on you, girl.
I heard that story as well. I thought it was great when I heard it.
Yeah. The other one, if her husband Richard's listening, Dorothy's husband's name is Richard, not Mr. Dorothy, as most people call him. Dan, you haven't met this lady, but she's a wonderful operator. What do you think?
Well, some people are just natural operators, right? You sit them down in front of a radio and pretty soon, they made a dozen or 2 dozen contacts. And I'm always amazed by those kind of folks, and this sounds like she's one of them.
Certainly is. Now, Edmund, you have met Dorothy on a number of occasions, so over to you.
I have met Dorothy, and she's a wonderful ambassador for amateur radio. So when I heard that somebody had telephoned the BBC Essex breakfast show and mentioned amateur radio, I was not at all surprised to go on to discover that the person in question was Dorothy, Mike 0 Lima, Mike Romeo. So BBC Essex is a local radio station in the east of England covering the county of Essex, and whilst that's not a tiny county, it's not enormous either. And 10, 20 years ago, if you wanted to hear this interview, you would have had to either have lived in Essex or been close enough to it to be able to receive BBC Essex on FM or medium wave AM, and you would have had to have been listening at the time the interview went out. Because of the wonders of modern technology, the internet, not only do you not need to have been listening live, you don't need to be in Essex or indeed anywhere near it. The breakfast show presented by Sonia Watson is available on the BBC Sounds website. These are time limited. From the day that we release this podcast, you have 18 days left to listen. Obviously, by virtue of me being in the UK, I have no way of testing whether that programme is available abroad or not. In theory, it should be, because BBC breakfast shows are normally speech-based rather than music-based. However, some local stations do play music between 6 and 7, less so later on in the programme. So you might find that the recording is not available outside of the UK for rights reasons. But assuming it is, you've got 18 days to listen to Dorothy from the date of the release of this podcast. And she appears 2 hours, 53 minutes into the breakfast show. And she rang up to talk about customised car registration numbers, and all power to her. I know this is a local station and a localised audience first and foremost, but it's good to have as many little things like this in the media as possible. So if anybody listening to this ever has the opportunity to ring up their local radio station, write to their local newspaper on any subject, but somehow manage to bring amateur radio into it, then I would encourage you to do so, because I think in episode 350 somebody suggested that what we really need is a 30-second advert in the middle of Coronation Street on ITV to promote amateur radio.
I don't watch Coronation Street.
Tiny stories, well, you're very sensible, Leslie, neither do I, and that little stories like this in local media here and there aren't particularly effective. And okay, if you take each one in isolation, that may be true. But if you put them all together, it's that cumulative drip, drip, drip effect. And I think Dorothy, not for the first time, has done really well to get amateur radio mentioned on, I think it was BBC Essex last time as well. So good on her. Well done, Dorothy, if you ever hear this. And like I say, any opportunity that you have to mention amateur radio or to bring amateur radio into talk discussions about other topics, then it's well worth doing. Martin, back to you.
Nice one, Dorothy. Keep it up. Well done.
Yeah, and as I say, I know Dorothy and Richard are both listeners, so good work. And I believe what they were trying to do, they were talking about car registrations, and just as a side, personalised number plates, your call sign in the UK. I think mine, if it was available, and I can't even find it available, would start at about £6,000 or £7,000 just to have my call sign M1MRB on my car. It used to, about 15 years ago, be on a Vauxhall Astra, I believe, in the Watford area. Who's got it now, I don't know. But in fairness, yeah, it'd be lovely to have your amateur radio call sign on your car. But quite honestly, I look at it and go, £6,000 for a number plate, just so I can be vanity and look at it and dribble over it, or buy 2 or 3 really good radios. There's not a lot of contest there, in my opinion. But that's the customised plate issue. Right, moving on. The IRTS AGM meeting rejected a new licence level proposal. Now, this is the Irish Amateur Radio Transmitting Society. and they at their AGM on the 24th of April. Now, we were thinking, from what we can see, that they were proposals to try and do multi-level licenses, but unfortunately it got cancelled. Dan, we were talking about countries with small populations in comparison to others, and Ireland, lovely country, but I think we checked there's about 4.9 million people in Ireland, and I think there's something like 2.6 million live in Dublin, about 1.6 in Cork, and the rest live the rest of Ireland. And so there's not a lot of amateurs in Ireland, something like about a couple of thousand, if my memory serves me right. What do you think, Dan?
Yeah, so I've been researching this a little bit, and according to the website of the, what do they call it, ComReg, Communications Regulation Agency, there are 1,945 amateur radio operators in Ireland. And so it was kind of interesting to think about how amateur radio gets regulated in smaller countries. And the one I sort of gravitated to was Slovakia. I'm Slovak American, and I still listen to Radio Slovakia International, actually. And I checked on Slovakia too, and they have about the same population, but they only have about half the number of amateurs that they do in Ireland for whatever reason. And I thought that was kind of amusing. But it's kind of interesting to me that in this case, that the IRTS, which is the Irish equivalent of the ARRL, can put the kibosh on this, where here in the United States, I don't, the sway of the ARRL has gotten a little bit less than that. The FCC does things the ARRL doesn't like anymore. But apparently in Ireland, as far as amateur radio goes, the IRTS still have the influence.
Yeah, I think it's probably because there are so few amateurs in Ireland, and that probably ComReg, which is the regulator, is probably not that worried and just says to the IRTS, you guys can administer yourselves. My guess, not 100%. What do you think, Edmund?
Well, my two initial thoughts were the news story says that the proposal was defeated by a narrow margin, but it doesn't say on what grounds, so I'd be interested to know what the objections were. And secondly, as has already been mentioned, as ComReg is the regulator, then surely it would be in their gift to say yay or nay to a novice-style licence rather than the IRTS. But beyond that, I don't really know what to make of it, Martin, if I'm honest.
Yeah, well, I don't think, if it's like in the UK, and I'm sure it'd be very similar in the States, the regulator sets out a block of frequencies, sets out various bits and pieces, then says, you guys behave yourself in this area, and probably gives it to the National Society to decide how you want to police it. I'm guessing. But that's probably why. And I think that at the moment there are only 2 exams a year in Ireland, and I think you have to take those in Dublin. So you have to make your way to Dublin, which is not an easy feat for somebody that they say lives down the Ring of Kerry, or even for Cork. It's a fair old trek up to Dublin to do your exam. So it's not made easy for people. And yeah, I reckon at some point in time they'll come over to a very similar English system that we operate, because the two countries are still somewhat aligned in most things we do. What do you think, Leslie?
Martin, I don't know the ins and outs of this story. I mean, we can only go by what's been reported. But my gut reaction is I think it's a shame, because the foundation holders and the intermediate licenses bring people in, that structure brings people into the hobby. And that is so important. And, eventually they get to the next level and they put a bit more studying in. But if you just had like we had in the 80s, where it was like, well, this is the exam. It's like, I can just imagine the fear in some people's faces. Wouldn't like to go back to what we had. And I think that our system isn't perfect, it isn't perfect. But I do think in terms of getting people into the hobby, yeah, some drop out and some will carry on. That's fine. But getting people into the hobby, I think that's the most important thing. And the structured system does help in that way. But if that's what they've decided not to do, that's entirely down to them. But I do think in, let's say, 5 or 10 years' time, they might have a rethink about this. But it's entirely up to them.
I think it might be before 5 or 10 years. This is one of those things that it was only defeated narrowly. So as we were talking to Stuart from the RSGB in the feature, just because the idea didn't float today doesn't mean that it isn't going to float later on.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, it's a matter of getting it at the right time. Right. It's a fair number of US stories this time, Dan, so I'm keeping you busy. Congress seeks to designate National Amateur Radio Operators Day. I think this could be fun. Have a special day. And I know Edmund's a big operator, but what do you think, Dan?
Yeah, so it'd be great. We'd have a lot of special event stations around the country and all that. And, one kind of the amusing thing about this story is that it was actually suggested by a 10-year-old kid. I was trying to find the exact quote out of this article, but it was suggested by a 10-year-old kid, and he got his congressperson to bring this up in Congress.
Dan, I found it. It's Lesco. Lesco introduced a similar bill last year at the request of Raymond Anderson, a 12-year-old from, I can't pronounce it.
Peoria,
AZ.
Right. Yeah. So he's
Arizona. Yeah. Yes.
So that's kind of a cool sidebar to this story.
Well, it's a good one, and I think getting things out in the open are always good. Edmund, what is your thoughts on this one?
Well, it's good news, obviously, and April the 18th is that the World Amateur Radio Day?
Yes.
Yeah, I thought so. So that to me sounds like a good excuse for a special event station. And if you're anything like the Spanish operators here in Europe, you can make the World Amateur Radio Day special event station run for an entire month. So you don't just have to limit yourself to 24 hours of operation. So, yeah, I fully support this proposal, although, I don't know, maybe living outside of the US, I don't know if that rather limits my right to support such things in the US Congress. But all power to the young man, and I would be really pleased to see this happen.
Well, I'll forward your recommendation to my congressperson.
Yeah, sounds good to me. Leslie, what's your thoughts on this one?
Well, I think it's a good idea. I mean, it gets amateur radio out there and it advertises what we can do and how people can get involved. Why not? It's great. Again, I'm not entitled to put views towards American Congress people, so I think they get rather upset. But no, overall, I think it's a good idea. Go with it.
To misquote Eddie Cochran, I'd like to help your son, but you're in the wrong country to vote.
Well, there's that one to it as well. Hi. Okay. Last news story. Dan, you put this one in once again, and I really thank you for this one because I missed this one. Amateur Radio Software Awards goes to KN4CRD for his contribution of JS8 Call. You've had dealings with this man, haven't you, Dan?
Oh yeah, not so much with Jordan, but the group that actually is giving out this award about 2 years ago now, and I forget who got it last year, but they've come up with this award to give recognition to people who have done some outstanding work in amateur radio software, and they have a really kind of a unique way of doing it as well, because they just don't get a bunch of their buddies and decide who to give it to. If you get on the committee, you have to put up some money for the award. So you have a little bit of skin in the game here. So I thought that was kind of an amusing way to do this. But certainly the awardee this year, Jordan Shearer, KN4CRD, is really worthy of the award. What he did was he developed this new digital mode called JS8 call. And what he did was he took the code base of FT8 and made it into I hesitate to say rag tube mode, but he made it into a mode where you can use some of the extra bits in a FT8 transmission to then send multiple transmissions in series. So that what that lets you do is to actually send messages, but with the technical advantages of FT8. So you get all that low signal to noise ratio performance, but yeah, you can actually send text messages. So that's very cool in my opinion. I've used JS8 call a few times, and it's been pretty cool. I really like it. And he's also, not only can you send messages, but he's also built in some networking features. So I don't know if you remember, there was a thing called FSQ that was being touted for a while. And what that digital mode let you do was actually store and forward messages for other stations. And he's built that kind of functionality in the JS8 call, which is, I think, probably a little used feature because it's kind of hard to comprehend. But again, I think it's a very cool feature. So anyway, the point is, it's a very interesting award committee, and Jordan is certainly a worthy recipient of this award.
Yeah, I agree with you. And as we move forward, software engineers are going to take a bigger role in our hobby, with software-defined radios and a lot of the new digital modes. People that can write software are certainly going to be very, very useful to our hobby. And it brings us closer in line with the computer industry, which most of us have a fairly good background in. Leslie, I know you don't do a lot of these digital modes on HF, but you're an HF person. But surely the software-defined side and software writers got to be good for the hobby.
It is. I used to work on a system many, many years ago called an adaptive system. We haven't seen that in the amateur radio fraternity yet, but when it does sort of come to us, I think amateurs will be shocked what it can do. But there we go. Going back to what you're saying about software, yes, I mean, I'm an old-fashioned engineer, mechanical relays, mechanical electrical type things, but the future's really going to be in software. That's a sort of next generation of stuff. And I've seen this in engineering, I've seen it in radio. Yep, software-defined radio, you're absolutely right. I need to learn up a lot more about this, otherwise I'm going to be out of date. But going back to what you were saying about awards, it's a worthy recipient, and it's not about getting a pot of gold. It's a case of saying, look, somebody's put a lot of good work into this, and that effort should be recognised, and that's a good thing. That's it strives them to do better things, which is good.
Yeah, I agree with you 100% on that. Edmund, what's your thoughts?
Well, as you may know, I'm not a digital mode operator at all, and I'm still yet to have my first FT8 QSO, never mind JS call. So I've not used that system, but nevertheless, congratulations to all involved with this. And one day, hopefully, I will make a contact using JS8 call. But once again, Martin, beyond that, I don't really know what I can say. Back to you.
Well, I know when we come to the end, you're going to tell us you have had digital contacts, but that's another story. I mean, this is a great idea, awarding people for software awards, and I'm sure everybody can think of a piece of software that they think somebody wrote that really ought to be awarded for an award like this. But say software engineers, keep it up. Just going to throw my 2 pennies in the pot here. Andy Taylor, the guy that wrote PyStar. That is a phenomenal piece of software that runs on hotspots, and a number of repeaters use it as the repeater software for multiple digital modes. Yeah, you can put multiple digital modes through it. Phenomenal piece of software. One guy, again, on his own produced this with the help of a couple of others I know, but predominantly it was Andy. So there are some really good pieces of software out there, and some of them, like PyStar, when it's working, nobody even thinks about it. I'm sorry, Andy, nobody thinks about it, but when you realise what some of these guys are doing, they are actually really improving our hobby. So keep up the good work, you software guys, because unfortunately I can't do it. I'm absolutely rubbish at writing code. So there we go. Well, that concludes the news stories. Let's find what everybody's been up to. Leslie, what have you been up to?
Well, apart from trying to stay out of trouble, Martin, you know me. Apart from work, put that to one side. There's an awful lot of things been happening with Ofcom and the new regulations that have come out, the RF assessment stuff. I've been very, very busy on the last month on that, and I'll be giving a presentation tomorrow to your local club. That's on the Zoom meeting, I believe. It's all done and ready, all done and dusted. I had a bit of a panic attack. I thought I had the talk done, and I'm coming home to Chingford on the 179 bus. Then all of a sudden I got an email saying the rules have all been changed, and I pulled all my hair out and said some things. But anyway, it's all amended, up to date, and raring to go tomorrow.
Well, that's good news. That's good news, and hopefully it wasn't too many changes they caught you on. Your presentation, I'm sure Chris will put it up online on the Sutton and Sheen website probably in about 10 days' time. So, but we're looking forward to it, Leslie, looking forward to it. Dan, what have you been up to?
Well, so I'm halfway through the latest online general class, and it looks like we're going to have a good group of graduates here in a couple of weeks. Plus, I'm starting to think about field day. Field day was kind of canceled last year, at least as far as we usually do it here with big club gatherings and all. But club is not going to do the big thing we usually do. But I'm thinking now, with many of us being vaccinated, we can probably do a smaller kind of gathering. And I think that's what we're going to end up doing. So I'm in the middle of sort of organizing and planning that.
Well, that'll be fun, Dan. I mean, getting out operating. I must admit, I'm looking forward to doing a bit more of that. I know Martin Rothwell is, and Chris has even bought his camper van to go out and do it. So,
there you go.
We are starting to look forward to doing a bit more outside. And, when it happens, it'll be great news to get out. And as more and more of us have our second jab, we're not immune to it, but we shouldn't be hospitalised if we do get the COVID. So that's a good thing. Edmund, what have you been up to?
Well, we're recording this on Wednesday, the 19th of May, and today Amberley Museum here in West Sussex reopened to the public for the first time since last December, having been closed since due to coronavirus. So our permanent special event station went back on the air. That's Golf Bravo 2 Charlie Papa Mike. And I was hoping for good conditions on the bands. And this afternoon we got them. 20 Metres is not a band that we use particularly often. Normally from this location, 20 Metres during Russian, Spanish from the south of Spain stations, and not very often stations from closer by. We were tuning across and we heard a very loud signal coming from a chap down in Plymouth in Devon. Very soon after that, after we worked in, we heard signals from Belgium and the Netherlands and England and Wales. So we went on to found a clear frequency called CQ, had the first pile up for as long as I can remember, and worked about 30 stations in a row. And in all honesty, I would have still been sitting there carrying on working them had the other group members said it wasn't time to lock the museum up and go home. So the moral of that one is if 20 Metres is a band that you don't use very often, it's worth keeping an eye on, if only from the point of view that if you suddenly hear stations on there from a lot closer by than you normally do, that can, not always, but it can be an indication that the higher HF bands will also be open. We didn't test that one out because as soon as we got a pile up going on 20 metres, there was no need for us to go up to 17, 15, 12 and 10. But yeah, even bands you don't normally use at this time of year, when sporadic E is possibly going to be about, it is worth keeping an ear on bands that you don't use normally. So that was the big success for today, because I was dreading our grand reopening day and zero propagation on all bands. So I'm mighty relieved that we got lucky in that respect. Only other thing that's happened recently is I have been playing around with my hotspot that hitherto has been D-Star only. And I've switched D-Star off and turned on Yaesu System Fusion because I do have a C4FM handheld. And I was fiddling in the menu settings and I came across an interesting looking entry that I was able to set my hotspot to. And without stealing too much of your thunder, Martin, I think maybe you can tell us a little bit more about that.
Well, I certainly can, but what I will say is that you called and you had within 10 minutes you'd worked 2 UK stations, a station in Texas, the States, and a station in Western Australia. So, you know, I think you went away with a smile from ear to ear that day. And I know you've been on 10 metres as well over the last few weeks.
Yes, again, that's not a band I normally do much with, but the Friday before we recorded this was exceptional. As I say, I don't normally go on that band. I think I worked about a dozen countries in 24 hours using just a vertical coaxial dipole, T2LT as some people call them sometimes, and about 50 watts SSB. So again, keep an ear on 10 metres, it's well worth it. And don't forget the FM section at the top. Put a random call out on 29.6, which is the FM calling frequency pretty much worldwide, I think, expecting nothing. And straight away, a station in Berlin came back to me without any warning. But it's equally frustrating, that band can be, because sporadic E can be very, very localized. And particularly if people have got better antennas than you can have DX envy, because I was looking on the cluster and social media and various places and seeing all these stations that other people were working that I couldn't hear at all. But bear in mind, that may be the situation now. 30 minutes later, the pendulum can swing in the other direction, and you could be working a whole host of stations that your friend 10 miles down the road with a better antenna system can't hear at all. So patience is required, but stick in there, and if you call often enough and stick at it, you'll probably do quite well on 10 metres or 6 metres indeed, and even 4 metres has been open. There was a net down here on the south coast the other week, and we were called by a Golf Mike station who was 5.9 for a couple of minutes. Somebody down here made a transmission that lasted 60 seconds, put it back to the Golf Mike station, and he was never heard of again. So keep it short. Don't go into sort of 5-minute rag chew overs like what I do sometimes.
Waffle mode.
Waffle mode on certain bands. But yeah, keep it quick, but it's really good fun. And if the band is open, you do not need lots of power and you do not need a good antenna necessarily. If the band is truly wide open, then all bets are off. So go for it.
Yeah, that sounds fun. Well, what have I been up to? I feel really guilty because I've done a fair amount of SWL listening. Yeah, just having a good listen around the shortwave bands, listening to various stuff, listening to Marine when I was down the coast the other day, and just generally enjoying listening. The other thing I have done, which we'll make the official announcement soon, but those of you listening this far into the podcast will be one of the first to know about it. The ICQ podcast digital project, which at the moment is DMR on Brandmeister, has now been linked or bridged with Yaesu Fusion and also NXDN. NXDN is the version of DMR that ICOM and CANWARN decided to use. So it's their flavour of DMR. So there is an NXDN gateway in. If you've bought one of those old radios at a rally, and I think ICOM call it IDAS, and the trade name for the CANWARN one is NetEdge. But either of those operate the NXDN protocol, and we can certainly link them across to DMR for you now if you've got one of those. Also, which is what happened to Edmund, we managed to link Yaesu Fusion. So Yaesu Fusion's linked in. If you've got a Fusion radio and a hotspot or a repeater that does Fusion, that links through Fusion, you can join us in the talk group, and you can come in on Fusion and obviously talk to people on DMR or vice versa. At the moment, I'm not 100% sure we've got everything 100% sorted. There's still some issue with most of the Yaesu repeaters run wires X, and the traffic's not going across to wires X at the moment. So I might have to do a few things there. But that's certainly there's movement. It's taken a while, but there's certainly movement on that. So we need to obviously make sure that it's bedded in, and before we try and put D-Star on as well. But at the moment, if you've got Brandmeister, Yaesu Fusion or NXDN, you can join us on the talk group. There are people on fairly regularly. Last time I looked, and I'm not doing the analysis till the end of the month, but 21 countries, 113 different users, and over 28,000 accesses to the group. So you may not find anybody there, but please, if you do join, please put a call through. If you blip it, then put a call through afterwards, just to let us know that you are there, because if I'm not looking at the dashboard, I don't know you've connected unless I hear you. So that's just a suggestion. So that's what I've been up to, boys. Not very much, I suppose, but we're getting there. Right. I'd like to thank each and every one of you for joining me tonight. I'd like to thank Mr. Leslie Butterfield G0CIB.
Thanks, Martin. Thanks for inviting me. Yeah, it's some really good stories here tonight.
I think so. We had fun as well, cracking on with them. I'd like to thank Mr. Dan Romachek, KB6NU.
Well, my pleasure, especially since you put me really to work today.
I did, didn't I? I should complain. That must be racism. I'm picking on the American. Not really, Dan. Before we get hundreds of letters, I'm joking with Dan. And last but not least, Mr. Edmund Spicer, M0MMG.
Thanks for having me on, Martin.
No problems, mate. And I'll probably hear you on the talk group over the next few days as well. So I'd like to say 73s to you all, and we'll continue with the rest of the podcast. 73, guys.
Cheerio.
7-3.
Keep your amateur ham radio podcast advert free by donating less than a length of coax. Visit www.icqpodcast.com/donate now. For all the news, links and information, visit www.icqpodcast.com.
Now it's time to have a look at the news in brief with me, Colin, M6BOY. We start off with news and congratulations to Catherine Mitchell, Mike 0 India Bravo Golf, for her induction into the CQ Hall of Fame. Catherine is an academic director of the University of Bath and also a recipient of the 2019 Edward Appleton Medal. Amongst other things, she's a trustee of the Radio Communications Foundation, which is an amateur radio charity, and a corresponding member of the RSGB's Propagation Studies Committee. So congratulations, Catherine, on your induction to the CQ Hall of Fame. Now, as COVID restrictions lift in the United Kingdom, the possibility of visiting Bletchley Park becomes open again to visitors to the UK, Whilst there, the National Radio Centre will also be open. I'd say 6 days a week. They won't be open on Wednesdays. So you have to pre-book in advance. I say with the Bletchley Park group on their website, but say once there you can take in the National Radio Centre. Now, the radio room will be open for demonstrations of amateur radio, but unfortunately visitors won't be allowed inside the radio room, and only volunteers of the National Radio Centre will be permitted to operate the GB3 RS station at this time. But good news that the National Radio Centre is coming back online. Final news story here, and UK registered hams would have noticed emails in their inbox last couple of days from Ofcom, and this is in relation to the electromagnetic calculations that are required now by all licence holders to make sure they conform with the new regulations. Now, just in case you haven't received your notifications from Ofcom, we're going to pop a link on this on the ICQ podcast webpage, and amongst other things, there's also an EMF calculator to work out, what you're actually transmitting and whether or not you're in tolerance of what's required. So obviously we'll publish it there for you so you can check from there. Right, well now we head over to our features episode, and our feature is an interview with the new RSG President, Stuart Bryant, Golf 3, Yankee Sierra X-Ray, as he discusses with Martin the IARU RSGB Survey. As always, hope you enjoy.
And now what you've all been waiting for, this episode's feature from the ICQ podcast. Well, hi guys, and welcome to this feature. A feature that I thought would be very, very useful. Region 1 of the IARU asked the national societies to produce a survey on what's going on in amateur radio. And Mr. Stuart Bryant, G3YSX, has come along to join us tonight. Stuart put the survey together. But first and foremost, before we start, let me congratulate Stuart on being the current president. And nice to see you got the job, Stuart.
Thank you, Martin, and I'll do my best to serve the community and the membership.
Yeah. I was to say, you and I have known each other about 18 years, and I was quite pleased that you got this one, so that was a good one.
Thank you.
Okay, the questions you had in your survey, Stuart, what are the 3 strengths of amateur radio in the UK was the first question. Do you want to go first, or do you want one of the guys to go first?
So I hope it's not going to make it too dull a meeting, but I would like to hear from other people, because I mean I can see what 500 people have already said about this. Obviously, I have some opinions, but I want to hear your opinions for yourselves, and I don't want my opinions to change what other people might input later in the process. So it's not a cop-out, it's about having the information in an uncoloured format.
Okay, well, that's more than welcome. And join in and interject when you want, Stuart, then. So, Edmund, what would you say are the 3 strengths to amateur radio in the UK?
I filled this in some time ago, so I'm actually struggling to remember what I wrote now, but I think the main highlights were that it is a very adaptable hobby. You can do it as much or as little as you want. You can put it aside for a few months or a few years, even in some people's cases, and then come back to it. It's a hobby that you can do alone. You don't have to travel to a particular location on a particular date. You don't have to arrange to meet other people to conduct the hobby with, for example. And the third thing was that almost uniquely, there are so many different hobbies within the hobby. So you can have one person who specialises or loves contests, somebody else like me, for example, who doesn't do contests at all, but who loves special event stations, for example. You can go into CW, slow scan TV, data modes, moon bounce, amateur television. Almost uniquely amongst hobbies, there's pretty much an unlimited number of hobbies within the hobby.
So that's, if you don't mind, that's amateur radio in general. Could you perhaps think about the UK? What special strengths are there associated with amateur radio in the United Kingdom, and of course, the Crown dependencies, etc.
As opposed to anywhere else? Well, I've never really operated anywhere else,
Okay.
so I would have to ponder upon that one, Stuart, I'm afraid.
Thank you.
You operated in the States, Edmund?
Yeah, about half a dozen QSOs on 2 meters FM. That's not a huge experience to draw upon, unfortunately, though.
No, okay. Leslie, what's your thoughts?
Well, one of them Edmund's already covered about the lots of different aspects in the hobby. This is probably one of the best technical hobbies out there, people. What can I say? Vast amount of technical knowledge available. This is a leading country sometimes. There's so much information out there. And one of the things I've noticed is things like the AM group. There's groups popping up via social media with different specialists in amateur radio, and I think that's fantastic. You did mention earlier, Stuart, about Crown dependencies. I have actually operated in various places, and one thing I noticed is that when you go into an amateur radio club, you're at home. There you are.
Thank you. It's interesting that that's the same in many countries. So I've been to a number of clubs in the United States, went on business trips and stuff, and it's really a sort of a worldwide association in many ways, isn't it? You've always got an icebreaker, you've always got something to talk about, and I agree with you. That's a significant strength of amateur radio.
Yeah, I agree on that one. Martin, what's your thoughts?
Well, the three strengths of amateur radio, I mean, I'm obviously thinking just in general at first. I think of things like low-cost gear. It's very easy for new people to get on the air, especially if your club's got a repeater, because let's face it, anybody coming along, you might look at this £3,000 ICOM radio or something like that, and you think, oh, geez, I can't afford that. But then you look at a £20 or a £30 Baofeng Watson Chinese handheld, and actually, if your club's got a local repeater, you're on the air, you're laughing, aren't you? Other strengths, people are normally willing to help each other out. I mean, you do get a few idiots. That, unfortunately, is the same with every hobby. But, we're not all like that. Pretty much most people are very welcoming and willing to give information. As Edmund mentioned, there's something for everyone. Digital voice, there's other digital modes, satellites, contest constructions, repeaters, HF microwaves, moon bounce, slow scan tele. I mean, the list is endless. These are, just massive strengths. I think, Leslie mentioned it. It's a hobby within a hobby. Great thing. With reference to the thing about, UK versus others, I've not really looked at other countries and what's going on in other countries, sort of outside of what we already discussed on the podcast. There's a lot of obvious things, like most of our bands overlap. I know that in perhaps in the US, some of the bands they've got don't quite match up with what we've got over here, and I'm sure that's the case in some other parts of the world. But most of our bands all overlap. But also in the UK, something that I've seen is that people like manufacturers are willing to help get clubs on the air. For example, Yaesu UK gave our club a repeater, so we could put Fusion on in London. Now, okay, that serves interest of both Yaesu and of the club, but they were willing to help us out. I'm not saying that other countries and other manufacturers don't do that in other parts of the world, but in the UK, that's something that's specific that I'm aware does happen. And I think there's some great strengths for amateur radio here.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, Stuart, my three, and Edmund, I printed my sheet out just so I had try to remember what I'd actually written. My three. Number one, local, national, and international friendship. That is an absolute A1 for amateur radio. Maybe not necessarily the UK, but it is a worldwide thing. When I go to Ireland, when I go to Cyprus, Germany, and the countries and the States, international friendship. You cannot better that. I have operated in most parts of the UK, Southern Ireland, France, Germany, and the States, as well as Cyprus. And wherever you go in the world, as a British amateur, you're respected. and that they're really pleased. And they always ask about the RSGB. Moving on, I think the hobby in itself gives a great education to radio and electronics. And some of the videos the RSGB produce are very, very informative. And lastly, from what I wrote, was increasing your knowledge of languages, geography, etc.
Okay.
I wasn't interested in geography because the teacher at school wasn't that particularly bothered. He sat us down, showed us a black and white film, and that was your geography lesson, and we paid no attention because we weren't interested. Now, when I talk to somebody the other side of the world, or somebody the other side of the world talks to me, we have an interest on what's going on, what's happening in the world. So I think amateur radio really is a glue for a lot of things in life. And just as a flippant one, Stuart, I know our American cousins, Bill and Frank, said that I should have had ICQ podcasts at the top of the list, but no, I wanted to be serious. So
actually, the huge number of people who voluntarily contribute to amateur radio is one of the strengths in this country. I mean, there's a huge number that do things through the RSGB, of course. And we're really, really grateful. We could not do things without the huge number of volunteers. But other organisations, such as yourself, also are providing new services and trying to and getting people to understand more and more about amateur radio and make it more enjoyable and to learn more.
Yeah. And I think the thing is, in many ways, is that we can't all be content creators. In fairness, the RSGB are content creators because they keep the membership and a large proportion of the Amateur Radio Society updated with your news broadcasts on a Sunday and your newsletters and Ragcom and all those things and your website. The same as we just try and keep people updated. But not everybody should be a content creator, because if everybody's a creator, you'd have no consumers. So
exactly.
So yeah. But I think the hobbies are alive, in my opinion.
Thank you.
Yeah. Are we happy with what we've done on this one?
I think so. And your other guests?
Anything else anybody wishes to add?
All good.
Yeah.
Okay, the next question, and it has to be asked, what are our weaknesses in amateur radio? Yeah, what are we doing wrong? Where do we go? Let's start off with Martin. Where are you going, Martin?
So weaknesses, and I've probably gone more than 3 because I'm just, I had a sort of a brain splurge and it was just, the words were coming out. So weaknesses of amateur radio, and again, this is not specifically just for the UK. I think some of the weaknesses of amateur radio, digital modes don't necessarily talk to each other, at least not in the same radio. There's a lack of genuine impartial information. You can go out there and say, hey, what radio should I buy? Do I want D-Star, DMR Fusion? Do I just want analog? Do I want something that does this? Do I want a shack in the box? And there's a lot of really, really sort of conflicting information out there. And you ask someone, and my friend has a different radio, and he says that your radio or your digital mode or whatever is rubbish. And think, well, hang on a second. We need, a clear, impartial advice of like, these are the kind of, if this is your budget, this is what you want to do. These are the kind of radios or kit that you need to be looking at, and this is what they could do. And then you narrow it down to like the top 3 or something like that, and then you can take your pick as to what one works better. Yeah, okay. Again, weaknesses of amateur radio. Again, occasionally you find someone that's not welcoming. We all know there was a person in our club, for example. And on my first day in the club, he said, you're not the kind of person we want in this hobby, because I wasn't personally interested in contesting, because I like to chat to people. Hence, we're doing what we're doing. But again, you do occasionally get that you sort of need someone in a club to say, oh yeah, just don't worry about him. Fortunately, there was someone sitting next to me at the time who said, ignore him, don't worry about that. Some of the weaknesses, poor promotion. I know everyone gets out there and says, hey, let's put a special event station on, let's do this. But in reality, how is a special event of just sitting there talking to someone helping the public get to know what amateur radio is? And I'll come to this a little bit later on as to how I think we should be promoting the hobby at public events rather than special events. But I think there's a lot more promotion that could be done to put us in a positive light. I'm not saying that special event stations put us in a negative light. I'm just saying there are things that could be done that would paste us in a positive light, and I'll come to that a little bit later. Another weakness of amateur radio, I think, and I'd also put them down as a threat, and this is probably going to throw a hand grenade in the room, and that is Ofcom. Because, and I refer to that, and I'll justify this, non-enforcement of illegal use of frequencies. 433.500, for those outside the UK, that is the UK 77's calling channel. There's a building site in London using that for comms around their site. There's so much crane noise all over the bands, constant use of power line technology, manufacturers building it into their equipment. We know power line is questionable. I suffer with it here, you know. I have to have a license to broadcast and to transmit. Why don't these power line devices have to be tighter regulated? Equally, new requirements to print off antenna, information about your antenna and how close you are to other people. We train for this. Maybe you need to include this for the foundation level, but you could include that in the training. But the full license, come on, guys, we train for this. I genuinely see that, them as a weakness.
Well, unless Stuart's going to come back on this one, your top five radio idea, everybody's, no matter what it is, whether it's radio, car, houses, holidays, whatever, everybody's going to have a different set of requirements. Where we need to be better, potentially, for new people coming into the hobby, is to train them in the understanding of the technology so that they can specify what they want. And if they specify what they want with a little bit of guidance from us, I mean, the last thing I think we should do is say, buy brand X, because that's great. I mean, I know a number of us have got the same DMR radio, basically, as I showed you mine. But the thing is, yes, I was talking to people that have been in the hobby a long time. People coming in need to be able to make their own decision and have the information given to them, the technical information given to them in a honest format, I would suggest.
I think, Martin, you've just given us a proposal for either a Tonight at 8 or a special video, or go and see if we can get someone to write a book, because I think there is a need to deconfuse that, and I'll probably be in trouble with Mark, the commercial manager, but I don't think we've got anything. But education is something that the RSGB is deeply committed to doing.
I mean, absolutely. I mean, one of the things about we talk about the radios and that help me choose the kind of radio I want. If people go in and say, this is what I want to do, this is the kind of budget that I have, I can or I can't put an antenna up at home, I want to use it in my car, I want to use it in my house, whatever. If they had like a series of like questions that you could base that on, right? And then you get referred to, okay, we talk about the big three manufacturers, but hey, these are the radios from these manufacturers that are in your price line. I don't think anyone should go and say, hey, you should buy an ICOM this, a Yaesu this, or a Kenwood that.
No.
But what we should be like, this is the kind of radio, this is the kind of thing you need to be looking at, and then go and talk to the people in the club that have got these radios, see what they like about them, what they don't like about them, and then make your own decision before you pay however many hundreds or thousands of pounds on that piece of kit.
Indeed.
Yeah. Leslie, what's your thoughts?
Well, I think some of my thunder has already been stolen. I've been frantically writing notes there and putting lines through them as people have been speaking. But anyway, I'll go through a couple of things. Yes, I do take your point that there are some really fantastic clubs out there, but there are some, it pains me to say it, that some are very, very insular. I sort of put it as, how can I find the right words for this? A sort of Victor Meldrew on steroids, but there we go. What other things? Yes, we're not very good as a hobby at selling the hobby. And to take your point about special event stations, Nothing's worse than when the radio amateur's at a radio and he's got his back to the members of the public. Every time I see that, I cringe. It drives me up the wall. Get the public involved to show, get them hands-on, playing with the radios under supervision. That's absolutely fine. Now, one other thing that I picked up on that's not been mentioned before is I think that we could, and I'm not sure how people are going to take this, but hey, let's punt it out there. Is I think we can do a lot more about cultivating people in political life that could assist the hobby. I feel that that's sometimes lacking. I mean, I know one particular example that will remain nameless. There was a complaint went in, the local MP was contacted. The result wasn't very great, and the MP wasn't very happy, but 10 years down the line, that MP became a minister. And did we do ourselves any favours? No. So I think a lot more can be done on that. And I think everything else has been covered on that. I don't like being negative, but if I was being pushed, those are the things I would say. Over to you, Martin.
Yeah, well, I'm going to throw one thing in before we bring Edmund in, and then I'll do mine at the end. But it's just something I'm thinking of. In the States, whenever they do a big field day, they have a go-to station where you can sit somebody down without a license, under supervision, and let them operate. I believe, unless it's changed phenomenally, you can't really do that in the UK. It's more sending a greetings message. And if you've got somebody that's
Absolutely
next to you, what a wonderful opportunity to let them have 2 or 3 QSOs and really get a flavour for the hobby. That would be something nice, I think,
Definitely.
that we could do.
I'll add that to the list of things that we should talk about. I don't know quite what the regulator's position would be, but it seems only a small advancement to where we are today, compared to just a very strict. You can say hello and that's it.
Yeah. Well, little things still. Some of these things I'm thinking of as we're going through, which is it's great, and obviously they'll be you're recording them, and they'll be in the podcast, so they'll be there for people to listen.
I mean, of course, that's not something in our gift, but there's nothing to stop us asking.
Yeah, correct. If you don't ask, you don't get it. So that's another thing. Edmund, what's your thoughts on our weaknesses?
I'll only mention one because the other things I've had in mind have already been covered, but a weakness that I perceive is the propensity of many amateurs to be effectively licensed listeners and nothing more. What we do about that and what causes it, I don't know, but I have lost count of the number of special event stations and club stations I've been to where there has been a fantastic setup in all respects, top of the range equipment, good quality resonant antennas, beams for the higher HF bands, a wonderful setup that I could only dream of at home, several amateurs sitting there in front of the equipment, but just talking to each other, drinking coffee, having a laugh, doing everything you can think of, apart from picking up the microphone and calling CQ. And if you'd told me that before I became licensed, I probably wouldn't have believed you. I would have said, well, no, that's nonsensical, going to all that effort to set up a really good quality station and then just sitting there drinking tea and coffee and not transmitting. Come on, that would never happen, would it? But the number of times that I've witnessed it firsthand, and the number of times the only reason the station has gone on the air at all is because I've picked up the microphone, you wouldn't credit it. And I'm not saying that because I'm trying to make myself out to be something wonderful, because I'm not. I'm just, another amateur like everybody else. So in a nutshell, we do seem to have an awful lot of people who don't switch the radio on, don't call CQ, and probably in a lot of cases then go on social media and say, oh, the bands are dead.
So you described my own radio club as perfectly. in terms of having an excellent shack that is only used by a tiny number of people. Not because we would do anything to encourage people to use it more, but for some reason people get worried about it. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know what the solution is. I mean, if people want to have a tea and biscuit club, then form a tea and biscuit club and have that as a separate entity. You don't need to be licensed to do that.
Oh, well, I'm sure all our clubs would welcome guests who are unlicensed, and hope to sort of that some of the enthusiasm rubs off onto them. And of course, many clubs serve many interests outside amateur radio as well, don't they? I mean, certainly a club I go to, 3D printing, mechanical engineering, model flying, real flying, history, and amateur radio in all of its forms and types.
Yeah, that's interesting. Well, the three I put down, Stuart, was our hobby seems to be, or is seen to be, an old person's hobby or part of CB. I have no axe to grind about CBers, but it's a perception of our hobby. I put down apathy of many in the hobby to promote anything new. They're worried about anything new. They don't want to look stupid, so they have apathy. And there's a lot of apathy in our hobby. It's not my hobby or your hobby, it's our hobby. And the last one I put down is lack of mainstream promotion of our hobby. Now, I know in the last couple of years, since Heather's been back on board as the communications manager at the RSGB, she has been getting into the actual mainstream media. But there's a lot more we could be doing as amateurs, I believe.
Yes. I mean, you presumably heard the numbers that the potential reach for what Heather did was it 35 million? And we can directly trace that as one of the root causes of the surge in new licenses and the surge in RSGB membership. So there is no doubt that the scaling that you get from the reach from the mainstream media dramatically helps the hobby. And we need to find instances of things that would interest the mainstream media. We need to do things that they find attractive, and that would act as a sort of a pull through for more people to enjoy our favourite pastime.
Certainly. Okay, move to the next question. What three opportunities could amateur radio take advantage of, i.e. trends, changes, wider society, technologies, those sort of things? So, what do you think, guys? Let's go with Leslie first on this one. What do you think, Leslie?
Oh, I'm going to put the cat amongst the pigeons on this one. Never mind. Let's go with it. Firstly, I think that with the recent COVID, that has accelerated technology, a use of technology by at least 20 years. And I think there could be much more online live teaching. Let's do it online. Not everyone can get to clubs, so I understand that. They may have other things, and well, okay, I missed that lecture, I'll download it at another time. As exactly what we're doing on the podcast. YouTubes, there's lots and lots of topics. You name it. Canadian psychologists, all that type of thing. You can download, and I believe a lot of the American universities as well, you can download their technical material and watch their lectures. Wow, just that's equivalent of the modern printing press on its, what you can do with it. And also, I think there should be more ELMA facilities helping out people when they've got the license. It's not just a case of getting the license; it's a case of setting up the station, and the exam doesn't always cover that. It's how do I actually crimp this stuff together? How do I actually physically put it together? And you can't always. Your hands dirty sometimes. That's my thoughts. Over to you, Martin.
Yeah, but then the other thing is, and we have to realise, guys, doesn't matter what license level you are, you can still be an ELMA. Somebody you may know a lot more about a subject.
Absolutely.
And so, if you, I've met guys that have designed military radios for a living and just got a just got a foundation license because that's all they really wanted to do, just tick the box for work. But they have far more knowledge on certain things than ever I'm going to have, and I'll be honest with you. So everybody can bring something to the hobby. That would be my fear on that one.
I wonder if we can put those two together. I don't know how to do it, but I wonder if we can put those together in terms of virtualized Elmers, as it were. And I'm not thinking of these strange robots that talk to you when you go to complain to your service provider or something or other. I'm thinking of real people, but maybe not necessarily having to go and turn out to someone's house.
Well, maybe it's a Monday night at 8 every so often where you have a panel and people ask questions.
Well, indeed. And, we have some ideas as to how we can sort of do some of that, but it needs to be wider than just the RSGB. It needs to be, at club level or at district level.
Certainly does. And we talked about earlier on about clubs and hubs. The hub, to me, was always the great idea. The biggest problem is, though, nobody wants to move their club into a hub. We've had this. There's one group tried it and didn't put enough effort in my opinion. But the whole thing is you've got to expand. Go on,
Martin. Can I pick up on that for the moment?
Yeah, go on.
One of the things I'd like to say is that we've got to learn to fail again. Now that sounds barking mad. Okay.
Yeah.
I tried lots of different ideas and most of them fell. But every time I've tried something, I've learned something from that.
Yeah.
And then when I'm at work and I'm trying something and somebody says, "You make that look so easy. You must be really lucky, Les. How did you do that?" And they didn't. And I'm sort of saying to myself, well, they didn't see the other 99% of times I tried and it didn't work. So, but that's what I'm saying. People have got to try things. They've got to try new ideas.
So one of the ways I've been looking at life and developing amateur radio, and particularly with my RSGB hat on, etc., is I've been thinking of it as what they call an agile project. Now, I don't know whether any of you are software engineers, but an agile project is one where you have continuous evolution. You continually learn by your mistakes and failures, but at all times you've got a viable working system. So we can't tear everything up as some people would like us to do with some things. We have to continually evolve, and part of evolution is not being afraid to make mistakes, but understanding when you've made a mistake, saying, "I'm sorry, that didn't work," backing out, and then trying something else. But if you don't fail, you're not really working at the edge, are you?
You're certainly not. And if you don't try, and that's something else that I used to find at our club is you'd come up with a suggestion and go, "No, we tried that 20 years ago. It didn't work. Nobody was interested."
Yeah.
Well, I have another saying that served me well over many years of career, and that's that every idea has to live in its own time. So just because an idea didn't work out once doesn't mean it should automatically be rejected as never working again. It could be that now is its time. And I've seen that time and time again, not only in processes and stuff, but I've seen it in technology. Many technical ideas, many first-class ideas, some that go back to the beginning of the internet, which were rejected, are now the flavor of the day, the must-have technology. We've been able to do them for many years, and now they're in vogue. And so it is with amateur radio technologies and organizational things and methods of doing things and trying to move the world forward. So never be afraid to fail, and never be afraid to try that thing again, or afraid to mention a thing that failed in the past, because now it might be its right time.
Yeah, agree with you. There's no such thing as a bad idea. A bad decision maybe, but not a bad idea. And even, if you come up with an idea and people don't like it, there's a fair chance they'll embellish it into something even better.
Martin, somebody said no to the Beatles. What more can you say?
Well, there you go.
Indeed, I remember that.
Yeah, there was quite a few interesting things like that around, weren't there? Right, Edmund, what's your thoughts?
Yes, guitar bands had their day, apparently. So the quotation went, opportunities. Well, I've possibly slightly misinterpreted the meaning of opportunity here, but the thing I thought of was opportunities to go on air by virtue of working from home. I didn't have a particularly long commute, but not only am I not doing that now, I'm also at home where my nice HF antennas are at lunch times, which I never was before. And I've certainly worked many stations and countries by being at my home station during my lunch break, which wouldn't have been available otherwise. So working from home opportunities for more activity. How about that?
Yeah, that's a good one. Martin, you got anything you want to add on opportunities?
Yes, I mean, I really love what Edmund was saying about, the opportunity to go on air and also the virtual Elmore program. I mean, that's brilliant. Other opportunities that we seem to miss out on, free workshops of electronics and radios for schools. They will pull your arm off for that. People doing Duke of Edinburgh awards. Part of the thing there, they have to take up a new hobby or learn a new skill. Amateur radio is key. You can do that, and it's if they're out doing Duke of Edinburgh, hey, they might want some comms along the way. Other things, social media, targeted social media advertising, but with better promotional videos. I'm not just talking about promotional videos of old men in their attics talking about their ailments on 80 meters. I'm talking about people doing, out doing a diverse group of people doing a variety of different things that the hobby can offer. Not just talking to each other, but we talk about fox hunts, direction fight, or whatever they call it now, but doing, these space station contacts, SSTV, all sorts of different things. Just show what it can do. And I'm not just talking about on Facebook, because Facebook is yesterday's news, I'm told. I still use Facebook. I don't use the new ones. But on new platforms like TikTok and Instagram and things like that, and as part of that, don't just promote the things that you can do in amateur radio. Promote the skills you will learn as a result of it. Yes, you can go on 2 meters and you can talk to someone up the road or on the other side of the world, wherever, with repeaters and networks and stuff. But you can also learn about electronics, about RF, about all these different things. And that's, surely this is an opportunity that we should be taking advantage of. Okay, perhaps at this point you're going to say, who's going to pay for that social media advertising then? Well, that's the never-ending question, isn't it? Who is it that wants to promote it? Maybe we all need to get in there somehow and even promote it on our own platforms. If the videos exist, maybe we can share it on our own social media things.
Yeah, so one of the things that people don't realize is that it's not when it works that you learn, it's when it doesn't work that you learn huge amounts of about the technology, about the operation, you just learn so much when it doesn't work compared to when it does. So you should try things, and Absolutely. Trying always is an opportunity to learn.
Certainly is. Right, well, my three, Stuart, just out of interest, was working closer with amateurs who work in the media to promote our hobby. Now, I know that there are 2 or 3 guys at the National Radio Centre at Bletchley Park that are ex-BBC employees. There are quite a few of them. Jim Lee still works for Radio 4. But not only that, these people should be the people that the media come to. We need to maybe have a set of people that understand our hobby that are on the inside of some of these media organisations, where the media organisation says, I need to get a truthful answer about what's going on. Who do I talk to? And maybe some of these people should be the ones. I also publicise what we do and how we can work with other hobbies. Now, I know instantly everybody thinks of the maker hobby, but what about mariners? What about your people that walk the mountains and one thing or another, and the comms they could supply themselves with to help themselves in emergencies? They might even take up SOTA. if somewhere nice and extra for them to walk, and the bits and pieces. But the last one I put is offer building workshops to the scouts and the general public, because I remember going back a good few years ago, I taught Colin how to solder, and we built a shortwave 40-meter receiver, and he was absolutely over the moon when it worked. He took it back to Ireland with him, and he was like, God, I actually built that. That was a day, but if there's kits and somebody's going to get something out of it at the end of the day, I'm sure the general public would be more than happy to come along and spend a day and leave with something to show for it. Obviously it has to be, we can't subsidise this, but I'm sure there'll be enough people that will be quite excited. And based on that, it is kind of showing what our hobby can do, the constructional part, and a little bit of theory and how it's working and thrown in. I would have thought might be useful, Stuart.
Yeah, I mean, it's really important. You say taking things away. I mean, it's a fundamental of marketing that you give someone something to take away, to remember what their experience, their interaction with you, and you hope that puts you in a good light, and you hope that means they come back and deal with you again. So yes, if we can find out something we can do in that sort of space, that would be really quite a good way of people remembering what their experience with amateur radio was.
Yeah, so that was my view. Moving to the next question you had. What do you think are the 3 threats to amateur radio in the UK? I.e. trends, changes in society, technology, etc. Now, I'm going to go first on this one, boys, because the background... No. The background noise on HF is just continuing to rise due to all of the domestic appliances that we have. Let's face it, back in the 60s and 70s, there weren't all these extra devices. Everything with electronics has got an oscillator into it that's whistling away, creating background noise. I think reduction in frequency allocation, because it will get sold off. We're already starting to see some of the microwave bands getting sold off around the world. That worries me a little bit. And I think we've got to move away from, and I've already covered this once, move away from we tried it 30 years ago and it's never going to work. So that were my 3. And as I say, that worries me, the background noise and getting the frequency. So we move up the band and then suddenly find that the band gets sold off from under us.
Those are 2 things that we worry about all the time, and one of our sort of duties is to try and help defend against those. I think it falls upon all of us to try and find ways of defending the spectrum. And one of the ways, of course, of defending the spectrum is to use it.
Yeah. Edmund, what's your thoughts?
Well, hand on heart, I'm not just saying this. The first 2 things I were going to say are exactly the same as what you said, Martin. I live in a semi-rural location where traditionally on HF the background noise has been relatively low. Since the beginning of lockdown in March 2020, there is so much noise on 80 metres, it's all but unusable, and sometimes even 2 metres has S9 of noise all the way across it, and it's not simply a case of finding one errant device or switch mode power supply in a building somewhere and switching it off. The noise is clearly a cumulative thing because it's much worse at some times than others. So if I were going to try to do direction finding to track down every single last device in all the nearby houses that are contributing towards that, well, I'd be on a hiding to nothing. I wouldn't really know where to start. So
just start at number 1 and work your way up the road, Edmund.
Yeah, so noise is a thing, and of course going higher in frequency to try and mitigate the effects of noise, we then bump into Martin's number 2 fear, which was also my number 2 fear, which is just as you try to go higher in frequency, that's when you find that those spectrums have been auctioned off or taken away from us by the powers that be. So yes, my first 2 match Martin's first 2. The third one that worries me a little bit is the ageing demographic of the amateur population overall, because whilst if I meet a new amateur, my first question is always going to be how active is she rather than how old is she. That's where my primary concern is. Nevertheless, I don't think it would be controversial or wrong to make a sweeping generalisation that the average age of the amateur in the UK is older rather than younger.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think you're right on that, and I do hear every now and again, and it's levelled against us as well on the podcast. White-haired old men. Yeah. So yes, Martin, what's your thoughts?
I'm not white-haired yet, but I think he's going that way. It's certainly going thin on the top. So some of the we talk about throwing the cat among the pigeons, and I'm going to upset some people here, and I apologise in advance. Personally, some of the threats I see to amateur radio, the sheer amount of contests that are on all the time. Non-contesters are going to get bored. They're going to go away. I switch HF on, I switch it off again because it's wall-to-wall with people going 5.9 next. It is crazy. When Martin mentioned the amount of background noises on HF, you try and find a clear space. I've heard the argument about the WARC band or bands, but those bands are not always open. You tune through, the contest is hogging the bands, there's no room for others. When you have got a frequency and you're chatting to someone else comes up, cranks his power up, goes over the top of you, steals your frequency, including operating on frequencies that are allocated for other things. For example, SSTV calling. Hang on, why are you calling CQ on 14230? That's a SSTV calling frequency. And now you've nicked it for the entire day and no one can play SSTV. I know, I'm going to upset some people by saying that, but I genuinely see that as a threat. Also, I talk about poor promotion. I mentioned special event stations earlier, and I know Edmund likes special events, and there's nothing wrong with special events. But when people put on a special event station to promote amateur radio to the public, and I think Leslie mentioned you see someone sitting with his back to the public, just calling there, and he's just giving signal reports. Oh yeah, you're 5 and 5 in this area. Yeah, we're a special event. Great. I think to some extent, the public don't care, and that's actually having a negative effect, and people are seeing sort of a negative side to the hobby. What you need to be doing, if you want to promote amateur radio to the general public, you need to be doing things that look a bit more fun, that look a little bit like you can do it with something that they might be able to afford. For example, why not try receiving SSTV with like a little RTL SDR dongle? Why not have someone up the road, one of your mates, ready to send you some pictures back? If you're going to send him something with your 817, maybe he can send you a couple of pictures back. Is the ISS transmitting something at the moment? Can you decode weather facts? Have you got Whisper? Hey, look, we're being picked up on this. I built this little aerial and, Whisper, is hearing me all over the place. Look at this. If you've got a cheap radio like a Baofeng or a Watson or another Chinese handheld, or, and you can connect it to Echolink through a repeater, or digital voice mode, DMR Fusion, D-Star, doesn't matter. Even if it is just connected to a hotspot in your car you're not talking about. But if you can have someone, for example, poised on the other side of the world and say, hey, Phil, what's going on? Where are you at the moment? And then the public can hear, hey, I'm, in this case, Phil could reply and say, hi, I'm in Australia. Weather's really hot at the moment. Hang on a second. You're doing that with how much is that handheld cost you? That cost you 50 quid, and you're doing that? Yeah, that's a little bit more exciting than someone sitting with their back to the public just chatting to his mates. Can you coincide it with a satellite pass? Have you built something? Hey, look, I've built this and I'm managing to do this with it. That's a much better way of promoting things. And, the other things that I see as, a threat is over-complexity of programming some of the radios. Perhaps that's a learning for our key manufacturers to think about how you program the radios. We don't always want to have to buy a programming cable and download the relevant software to do it. Why is it not easy from the front panel? I know that some radios are, and some radios are getting there, but some of them they're very, very difficult. And I mentioned as well as a threat to the hobby, Ofcom, not just selling off spectrum, and I get why they do it, because broadcasters want microwave frequencies, but equally the aforementioned things about not enforcing not enforcement of illegal use, crane noise, PLT, that sort of stuff. Again, I see it all as a threat.
Yeah. Well, in fairness, if Ofcom would like to come and talk to us, Martin, I'd be more than willing to have them
Absolutely.
on. Yeah.
And I'm very prepared to be corrected before anyone says I'm picking on Ofcom. I'm not. I'm very prepared to be corrected, but that's as I see it from where I'm sitting right now.
I was going to say, I don't think the threat's so much broadcasters. The threat is with all of these new wireless things that people want to do. The drones, the radar on the front of your car that's doing anti-collision, the 5G that's allowing you to have really first-class quality video delivered in places that you would never otherwise get it. And we want all those things. We like the safety and we like the utility, but it takes spectrum. So we have to be careful to defend against not just the broadcasting world, but we have to sit in this world where wireless is an important technology that needs spectrum, and we have to show that our use of this spectrum as a learning tool, as a social tool, is as important as these other new innovations.
Absolutely. I only mention broadcasters because I work in broadcast, and we use microwave frequencies for what we do. So it's the first thing that came to hand. But absolutely, yeah, you're right. 4G and 5G and other services. Absolutely, I totally get it.
Yeah. Leslie, last words on this one.
Oh, I've been waiting in anticipation and listening to the comments.
I knew you had.
Thank you, Martin. I'll go through some of them. The spectrum being monetised. Wow. Yes, it has. I mean, if you go back into the 80s, when I first got my licence, the radio spectrum was sort of a back room in the Home Office. It just hidden away somewhere. And if you think now, if you look at the income they get from licensing, especially, should we say, mobile phones and all the rest of it, I would say it was I don't know the exact figures, but I would say it was comparable to the money we got from all North Sea oil at the time. But there we go. So it has been very, very monetised. And, well, yeah, guess what rules the roost on that? As far as noise, I have an issue with this, is that, yes, there is noise, and yet, yes, there is emissions from all these products, but actually it doesn't exist. And I see people sit back in shock and say, Leslie, no, you're wrong. Well, actually, how many complaints actually land on Ofcom's desk?
That is a really important point to make there, Leslie, because one of the things we've been encouraging people to do, particularly around with the DSL complaints, for example.
Yes, exactly. That's exactly what I was thinking about.
Is to make sure that we know in the RSGB that we know, and there is I believe a website for doing this. So don't phone up HQ with every one of these, but there is a way of reporting to us your issue and what the resolution of your issue is, because it's only if we have a body of evidence that's significant that we can try and persuade Ofcom to do things. Now, in the case of DSL, I mean, it's really, really tough, right? Because that's been holding the economy of this country together for the last 18 months. Everyone who's sort of maintained their social contact, many of those people who've been working from home, they've been doing it because of DSL. So we would have to weigh our concern against the concern of the majority. Now, that's not to say that we don't have rights, and it's not to say we shouldn't do things, but we've got to make sure that we speak to Ofcom in terms of the volume of the size of the issue, and also understand how we balance our needs against the wider needs.
Yes, I believe when they put the legislation together, that there's normally a whole load of guff, technical guff, and then there's normally a paragraph right at the bottom, hidden away, that nobody ever notices, that says these regulations have to be balanced against the economic benefit. Well, I'm going to pick up on one last thing, if I may. The panel mentioned about, should we say, old white men. Right. One thing we need to do is to open up this hobby. If we're going to, this is a multicultural, multifaceted society, and if we open up, and we open up our clubs more, and we open up the hobby more, then our market is more, and we will get more members, and we will get more people into the hobby. If we're insular and we keep to our own little group, it will wither.
I completely agree with you on that.
Society has changed, but I don't think we have. Over to you.
I certainly agree that we need to open up, and then you are not the only one by a long, long, long way to point out that we need to do something about the demographic. We clearly do, and I'm looking for people to help me with ideas about simple, practical, pragmatic things that we can do, both at the RSGB level and at a club level, to address that problem. It is the most common problem that I have seen mentioned in the survey.
Can I just make a point on something that Leslie said as well? He mentioned economic viability and, when it comes to interference and things like that. If something was interfering with aircraft, for example, I guarantee you that they would put the aircraft first because It's safety related. Therefore,
correct. I work on the railways.
Exactly. Therefore, they can do something about it. It's whether they will or not. You can say they're not going to shut down DSL. No one's asking anyone to shut down DSL. I'm talking through a DSL line right now as we speak. But there are things that can be done relatively cheaply to protect the interference. I personally have never had interference from DSL, at least not that I know of. My interference comes from PLT. But there are things that they can do to prevent it that should just be do it as standard. We shouldn't have to push them to do it. But I welcome, going on to the, I was aware we could complain to Ofcom about, to Ofcom about like the VDSL stuff. I'd welcome the opportunity to highlight other things to them on a simple platform.
Right. So my hope is that the DSL problem would disappear. I mean, they made a mistake or a trade-off or whatever it was that made it worse for us than it should have been. But hopefully they're going to rip all this out in the next few years and replace it with fibre, which should be a much cleaner system with much more performance, and allows us to do so many more things. Those of us who haven't been able to see family members on the other side of the world should be able to see them in ultra high definition. And if innovators manage to pull it off, it'll be sort of Huggo vision or whatever. It's called haptic networking. So, but hopefully that one will go away. But there are many other threats. Vehicle charging is the one that we're particularly worried about. I know that Don, the IARU chair, Don Beattie, the IARU Region 1 chair, is particularly worried about these huge energy pulses that will exist when they introduce live vehicle charging through some of these low frequency techniques. Now, the reason for having a strong national society, the reason for having is that it feeds into a strong IARU. The reason for having a strong IARU is so that lots of countries can work together to influence the regulators to put in criteria and standards for these types of systems, so that the threat that we can see coming is mitigated before it occurs.
Stuart, I would like to mention, I do have my own views on standards and how they're put together, but I'd rather do that offline if you wouldn't mind.
Okay.
Yeah. So, Stuart, we've now for the best part of an hour, just over an hour, with your four main questions. Do you think that we've given you some insight? Do you think we're wrong? Do you think that we're different from most amateurs? I don't know. What's your initial feeling?
Well, of course, no one is wrong, right? Everyone has a right to perceive these important issues in a way that that is brought about by their own experience and etc. A lot of what you've said is very common. That is to say, these are issues that other people have brought forward. And my suspicion is that when we talk to our colleagues across Region 1, I mean, Region 1, for those that don't know, is in commercial terms, it's what we would call Europe, Middle East, and Africa, but it is slightly larger than that. So when we bring all this together, it would not surprise me if we don't see a common picture. But it's always as good to get as many different views as possible. But you are aligned with what I am seeing elsewhere.
Well, that's good news in some ways, and I'd say, we're not going straight off the wall. Now, last thoughts. Martin, you had one or two questions you wanted to pose.
Yeah, I mean, well, I would say if people disagree with what we're saying, I mean, this is why we're doing. This is why the RSGB are doing this survey. Go fill it out, whether you're a member of the RSGB or not. Go and fill it out. That's the easiest way to have your say as well. And yeah, there were a few other points that were referenced on the RSGB website, and many of the points I've already covered. But one of the things we always talk about, how to attract more people to the hobby, and one of the questions that we were asked recently is, how do you attract more women to the hobby? One of the points that I've thought of here is like, ditch archaic language that seems to be used regularly, and not just on the air, but in publications, on social media, and all sorts of things. People talk about the term XYL. Technically, that's borderline discriminatory. There is one podcast, and I'm not gonna embarrass them, but they list all their presenters, and then they list a lady there and say XYL side of things, as if the woman would have a different opinion on something. And on principle, I won't listen to that podcast, because it's there's a lot of discriminatory things, and there's a lot of archaic things. We need to start thinking about. Come on, we're in 2021 now. We need to start pushing things forward. Let's remember, it's a Hollywood actress who, who's behind the major advances behind Wi-Fi. It was a first computer programmer, was a woman who Alan Turing then based his computer on her notes. So let's start moving forward with modern terminology. So that was my main thoughts there.
You have read my mind. I am looking, I mean, it'd be too late for this year, but I am looking at the yearbook and looking at I've got a bookmark on that list of abbreviations. And I would certainly be interested in what people think should be deleted. I've certainly got some views, but it does worry me when I look at it. A few other things worry me as well, but it will take a while to address them.
I mean, share it among us. Be happy to cast an eye over it.
Well, I think if unless anybody's got any other questions they want to throw into the pot at the moment, I think we've had quite a good discussion. And once again, this is an ICQ discussion. There's no right or wrong answer. As I've had people say to me the other day on the last podcast, I didn't agree with everything, and that's it. You won't always agree with everything we got to say. But if we don't raise these subjects, then nobody will ever do anything about them. So hopefully we've got some goodness out of this one. I'd like to thank Mr. Stuart Bryant, G0CIB, President of the RSGB, for joining us tonight.
Thank you, Martin, and thank you very much for all of you for your time. Been very interesting to get the feedback, and look forward to talking to you again.
Yeah. I'd like to thank Mr. Leslie Butterfield, G0CIB.
Thank you, Martin, for the invite. Much appreciated. And it was very good to meet up with Stuart for the first time, and I wish him all the very best in his new role.
That's good. I'd like to thank Mr. Edmund Spicer, M0MMG, for joining us.
Thank you for having me on, Martin. Could I just add one thing, please?
Of course you can.
Thank you. When I mentioned about the ageing demographic, real or perceived, of amateur radio,
you weren't getting at me, were you?
Naturally, yes. My concern was to do with the continuation of the hobby, rather than age being a negative thing per se. I thought I'd just better point that out. And when I walked into the local amateur radio club for the first time ever in 2009, everybody in the room, I think, was older than me, because I'm only in my early 40s now. But I thought that was a good thing, because yes, okay, they were older and a lot older in many cases, but that also means they had experience and knowledge built up over many decades. If everybody had been my age or younger, yes, I suppose in some ways you could say that might have been nice from a socialising or fitting in straight away point of view, but I suspect I would have found myself thinking, some of these kids, do they really know what they're doing? Do they have the experience that I want to learn and benefit from? So when I mentioned age, it certainly wasn't in a pejorative sense, only from the point of view of continuation of the hobby in decades ahead.
Young at heart, I think, is what you're trying to say in the nicest possible way. And I'd also, so thanks, Edmund, for that one. I'd also like to thank Mr. Martin Ruffle, M0SGL.
Well, when Edmund mentioned the age of people and the ageing population within the hobby, naturally, Martin, your name came straight to the top of the list. Just for the record, okay. But no, it's been fun. Enjoy.
Okay, guys. Well, thank you very much for joining me. I'll say 73s to you all, and we'll continue with the podcast. 73, guys.
See ya.
Thank you.
Cheerio. The ICQ Amateur Ham Radio Podcast, serving the amateur ham radio community fortnightly since 2008.
Well, welcome back, everybody. Well, obviously, we encourage you to do your bit and take part in the survey that was discussed there by the new RSGB President, Stuart Bryant, Golf 3 Yankee Sierra X-Ray. And so, obviously, it's another great opportunity to make sure our views are heard and help shape our hobby. Now, talking about listening to being heard, it's great to get feedback from you, and we welcome feedback from Simon Wilton. He's got a couple of call signs, Victor Alpha 3, Sierra India India, and Golf 7, Hotel Charlie Delta. And he says, hi guys, love the podcast and the chat, as you know. Bit of feedback for the podcast. I've heard a few times now referring to DMR access and the statement, don't just blip it. Well, I'd like to add, yes, do blip it, then wait a second before calling in, as sometimes radios don't hear traffic unless there's a delay on Brandmeister and it comes back up again on the next push to talk. So Simon, 73, to you, and thanks a lot for that feedback there. Thanks a lot. And yeah, it's a good point, that isn't it, there about Brandmeister. I know when we say just don't blip it, we mean obviously don't blip and run away, but I think, is it one of Edmund's great things? If you keep calling, someone will return, and I think that sums it up nicely, doesn't it?
Certainly does, Colin. And yeah, Simon's right. I've spoken to Simon a number of times. He's one of the many people that are using our talk group, and very interesting guy to talk to. He's a Brit abroad. Hi, Simon. And the don't just blip it statement was that, in fairness, if somebody just blips it and doesn't come back and doesn't put a call through, then invariably I don't spot them, and I will respond if somebody's on, along with a number of other people. So agree with you. Blip it if you want to sync your radio up, but do please put calls through so we'll respond to you.
No problems at all. Now, just another little note here. It was passed on to us. There is a technical supplement that's available for RSGB members, which provides more in-depth technical information for those that require it. It's called Radcom Plus, and if you want to find out more about Whisper Lite and automation systems for that, sporadically using Pi WebCat to control your transceiver, or developing a wireless temperature sensor, you can download this special add-on to your RSGB membership by going to rsgb.org/Radcom Plus. So just a heads up there for anyone that's not aware of that service the RSGB offers their members. Say some more technical stuff from the guys there. Now we're going to head back to the DMR group, Dad, and I would say, what's the latest that's going on with the DMR group, which I know you've been working on since our last episode?
Yeah, we certainly have, and as we mentioned at the end of the news roundtable, our DMR group, our Brandmeister DMR group, is now bridged across to an ICQ bridge that allows Yaesu Fusion to connect to it. And if you have a Yaesu Fusion radio with a hotspot or a repeater that will forward Fusion, then you should be able to get into us. The talk group number for Fusion is #09480. That once again, it's #09480. And that will get you in. For any of you that were at rallies and spotted ICOM radios or Kenwood radios, XDMR radios, we now have NXDN as well bridged through to Brandmeister. So ICOM brand name is IDAS, and the Kenwood is Neck Edge, and what they will go through. And if you set your radio to or hotspot to communicate with NXDM talk group 9480, you will also be able to talk to Fusion radios and Brandmeister network radios as well. So all in all, we're starting to open up. As I say, please treat it with respect. It is in test mode, and I'm just gone past test mode, but and there are a few more users coming on, but it's taken a while, but everything is working smoothly, and we will continue trying to develop a bit more of our digital project as time goes on. So a few more users. And hopefully after this podcast goes out and the masses know it's there, maybe we'll have quite a few more users, Colin.
Fantastic. Now, if you didn't quite catch any of the numbers, etc., we'll update the ICQ podcast website section, so you have all the details there for in the coming days. So, that'll be updated there for you. Well, as always, we need to do our thank yous. So we'd like to thank Leslie, Golf Zero, Charlie, India, Bravo, Dan, Kilo, Bravo 6, November Uniform, and Edmund, Mike Zero, Mike November Golf for joining us in the news round table. Thanks a lot, guys, for expressing your views and opinions, and hopefully it's generated some thoughts for you all. We'd like to thank Stuart Bryant, Golf 3, Yankee Sierra X-Ray for taking part in our feature. And suggest again, guys, check out the survey, and certainly show your opinions, etc., and let the guys know. And of course, we couldn't do the episode without our wonderful supporters, and that keep us advert free and show their value and what they enjoyed in the show. So along with our monthly and subscription donors, we'd like to thank Patrick Bean, Simon Brace Girdle, and Walter Washbourne, Kilo Tango Zero Delta, for kindly showing the value that they found in our work, and providing some financial support. As always, if you found value in this show, all you need to do is go to www.icqpodcast.com/donate. Think of a value in monetary terms that you found in the show, and send it our way, and it pays our running costs and keeps the show advert free. So we'd really suggest doing that if you could. Right, well, I think that just about wraps up everything from our end now, Dad. And as always, the most important thing we do at this time of day now is obviously to make a cup of tea and find a treat for Mrs. B.
We certainly will, Colin. Mrs. B is well due a chocolate biscuit this episode, so she's been listening to some of the content as well while I've been editing. So really good. So I'm going to make Mrs. B that cup of tea, find her that chocolate biscuit, and we're going to sit and relax, Colin.
That's wonderful. Well, guys, I'm going to bid you all 73s, and I hope you have a relaxing time listening to the show. And as always, guys, we'll do this all again for you in a fortnight's time. 73s all.
73.